I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And a big day on Hurt Court TV. A lot of things were happening. One of them is the final chapter of the Slender Man stabbing. Are you familiar with this one? So the first thing I want to do is back this up, because we've been talking about this for years. But tonight I want to explain to you who Slender Man is and where he came from. Okay? Take a look at the picture. I've got a picture for you. This is Slender Man, okay? A paranormal figure said to have existed for centuries, characterized as a tall male-looking being, like male-looking, maybe not be male, with several tentacle-like arms that protrude from his back. He's commonly depicted in the woods of suburban areas and is known to lure children away, leading to their disappearance. Now, using the SlenderArchives.com website, we were also able to find the origins of this Slender Man mythology. I mean, it's all right here for you if you want to look it up later, but I'll give you the short version. It initially surfaced back in 2009 on a forum that was named Something Awful. Slender Man was depicted in pictures submitted to a paranormal images contest. So they had a contest here. The images were first created by a man named Eric Knudsen, and then shortly after the myth became wildly popular on the internet, it became the focus of hundreds of stories, pictures, artwork, video games, and more. I mean, it just took on a life of its own, this Slender Man thing. I mean, I talked to my kids to verify this, by the way. Both of them, age 20, 25, said, yeah, it was a thing. It was a thing like 10 years ago. There's even the Slender Man Halloween costume. There it is. So this whole thing, children became, some of them, very obsessed with it. And that's what led to this Slender Man stabbing. Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weir, these were the two 12-year-olds who lured their friend into the woods, stabbed her 19 times. 19 times. Their friend, okay? Well, that friend survived, was able to go back to school, but obviously now what do you do with these two, right? They were sent away because of their mental status. One was released, Anissa Weir was released in 2021, and now Morgan Geyser in court today. She was the one with the knife in her hand, 19 times stabbing her friend, and she is attempting to get released, some sort of a conditional release. Michael Ayala, Court TV anchor, has more on the background of this story and how we got to where we are today.
I just want to let Bella and her family know I'm sorry. I never meant this to happen.
That's Morgan Geyser at her sentencing hearing after pleading guilty to a brutal stabbing that left her friend clinging to life. Geyser and another girl, Anissa Weir, stabbed fellow 6th grader Peyton Bella Lutner after a sleepover at Geyser's home. The girls, who were 12 years old, claimed they carried out the attack over their belief in a fictional internet horror character named Slender Man.
I believed that if I didn't go through with it, Slender Man would come and attack and kill myself, my friends, and my family.
Weir pleaded guilty to being a party to second-degree homicide, while Geyser pleaded guilty to attempted first-degree intentional homicide. Both girls were deemed not responsible for their actions because of mental illness and ordered to serve their sentences at mental health facilities. 25 years for Anissa Weir, 40 years for Geyser. At a separate plea hearing, the girls described what happened as they attacked their friend on that spring day in 2014.
Morgan asked me whether or not she should do it, and I just wanted it to be over with, so I said, just go berserk, do what you have to do.
I came up from behind her, and I jumped on her. I tackled her, and I stabbed her.
Do you know how many times you did it?
19.
Their victim, 12-year-old Peyton Leutner, was stabbed in her arms, legs, chest, and torso and had multiple surgeries to repair her internal injuries. Anissa Weier was granted conditional release in 2021. Morgan Geyser is now 21 years old and is requesting conditional release from the mental health facility where she's been kept since 2017.
And the hearing began today. Dr. Deborah Collins, the psychiatrist who examined Geyser and with the original diagnosis and everything of what was going on with her, testified today. Let's take a listen to part of that.
Describe again for the court ultimately what you concluded regarding Morgan's mental responsibility in this case.
I concluded to a reasonable degree of professional certainty that at the time of the index offense, so May 31st of 2014, she was suffering from a condition which would qualify as a mental disease or defect as broadly defined by the Wisconsin jury instructions. And I also concluded that because of symptoms of that condition, she was rendered to lack substantial capacity to appreciate wrongfulness or conform her conduct to the requirements of the law, and that there was support for her plea in this case.
And what was the mental condition that you diagnosed her as suffering from at that time?
As I recall, the mental condition was unspecified schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorder.
Let's bring in our special guest joining us in Los Angeles, California, clinical and forensic neuropsychologist and author of the book, The New Rules of Attachment. Dr. Judy Ho is with us. All right, let's start here with this unspecified schizophrenic spectrum. What exactly does that mean? How does it manifest itself in a 12-year-old?
Vinny, this is a type of diagnosis that essentially means you're not diagnosing them with the full-blown schizophrenia condition that we probably know a little bit more of in terms of the lay population speaking about it and having that in casual conversation. This unspecified diagnosis really is about this person being judged to be on the spectrum where there is a primary psychosis that's operating, but that they're not meeting the full-blown criteria of schizophrenia. So usually this diagnosis is applied in an emergency room setting when you haven't gotten a huge chance to know the individual really well, but you're saying, I know there's something going on here that signifies psychosis, and it's not due to something like a substance or a medication or some kind of medical condition that might be causing this temporarily in someone.
Is it strange that two friends, 12 years old, would together engage in this sort of conduct and have this break from reality and not be able to understand or appreciate the wrongfulness of what they did? Like two of them together, 12 years old.
Right, Vinny. And so while it's very tragic, this type of shared delusion does happen. Essentially, usually though, when there's a shared delusion among two people, or maybe sometimes it's 3 or 4, or even a group, there is a ringleader. There is somebody who is saying, this is what I believe in. And then the other individuals, in this case, there's at least one other person who is saying, I believe this too. And what do we need to do to make sure that we're doing what is tasked of us? We're doing something that's purposeful. So there's usually, again, a ringleader, but it's not totally unusual for two people who are in very close relationship to share a delusion just because of their close contact, the conversations they may be having, and also the types of mental health conditions they may also be suffering at the time.
Okay, what I want to do now is flash forward to where we are now, where a judge has to decide based upon experts like you analyzing who she is now. Let's take a listen to Dr. Deborah Collins, because this really was, I think, the headline from today. Let's watch.
I acknowledged in my report the diagnostic conundrum that had been presented by this case in the interim between the 2022 evaluation and present.
And what is that conundrum that was presented?
The conundrum occurred in the fall of 2022 when Ms. Geyser told her treating psychiatrist that she had never heretofore suffered from psychotic symptoms, but rather that she was faking those or mimicking those from others in order to, and that she had begun to do that immediately following the offense in this case, the index offense, and that she had done that to assure that the home in which she was sexually abused by her father repeatedly was one to which she would not be returned, and that she would stay in a mental health institute.
Why is the accuracy of her self-reporting important?
Because psychotic symptoms are essentially a private phenomenon. The rest of us don't hear the voices if someone's hearing them. The rest of us don't hold the delusional beliefs someone holds. And they're not tangible. And so one source of information necessarily or ideally is the person experiencing those symptoms himself or herself.
So Dr. Judy Ho, what I'm hearing here is that this young girl at a young age is saying once she ends up in this institution, this facility, she is now faking everything. She's mimicking other people, and she's apparently fooling everyone there until she admits that she's faking it all? Like, how is anyone supposed to understand mentally where she is now and whether or not she's a danger, a potential danger to herself and importantly as well, others?
Great question, Vinny. I mean, this brings in so many different considerations as we're considering, can this person be returned as a productive citizen of society? Can she actually function without recidivating? Can she actually function without committing another violent offense? And now her credibility is in question. I think earlier, people took essentially this idea as truth, that maybe she was suffering from a psychotic illness. Now, there's still a possible disagreement of when somebody suffers a psychotic illness, do they still know right from wrong? That's the bar. That's the legal bar, right? Of should you be culpable in the same exact way for your crimes as somebody who does absolutely know right from wrong? Now, at the time, I think people thought this is a very sick individual. They need treatment, not the traditional prison sentence. So then she got that treatment, but now she's saying, haha, I was never sick in the way that you thought. I pretended to have a psychosis to escape the trauma I was experiencing in my family, which of course, if that's true, that's very sad. But what does this mean now? Where does this leave us? She received treatment for a psychosis she may not have suffered. And if that's the case, and if she thought that that was the right thing to do was to lie at the time, what do we think about her underlying criminality? And potentially, are there these psychopathic tendencies that in some ways are even more concerning than a person who has psychotic symptoms that are not treated? Because this is somebody then who is manipulating, who is callous, who has low empathy. And as you might remember, Vinny, some of the earlier reports was that after the crime, she, unlike her friend, didn't show any emotion about hurting her fellow friend, that it was fine with her almost, there was no emotional content, whereas Wire actually looked like she felt guilty for what happened.
So how do we, if she's saying in 2022 that when all this was happening, right after it happened, like not at the time, but right after it happened, then I started faking it. It's because I didn't want to go back to my home because I was being sexually abused.
Right.
How do we know she's not faking it before then to avoid, I don't know, incarceration?
Right, exactly. And that, I think, this is the biggest conundrum that we have, is was this 12-year-old faking even before this crime happened, right after this crime happened? How long has she been faking if she's now admitting to faking after the fact? How long was this deception going on? And how much more can she be manipulating now? What is she doing now that isn't truthful? And what will she do in the future that isn't truthful, that might actually harm society and specific individuals? So I think as Dr. Collins is recalling this, she was saying that at the time she made this judgment and thought, you know, she didn't know right from wrong based on her assessment. But now it seems like there's a possibility she did know right from wrong, and she was manipulating the system to begin with. So that's a very big problem. Should she be considered then for conditional release based on this information?
And is there any way to get to the truth? Or is it all in her mind and you just have to try to figure it out from there?
Well, I think Dr. Collins is right in some ways that, of course, psychotic symptoms is a private phenomenon. If you tell somebody you're hearing voices and other people don't hear it, that's one way of saying maybe you're having psychotic symptoms. But there are things that you can observe too, not only as a clinician, but even talking to people who knew her at the time. Was she sometimes seemingly talking to herself? Did sometimes her logic just not make sense, even when she didn't think a lot of people were listening or watching her? You know, so we have to sort of try to piece together everything that we know about this person, and it involves probably multiple reports from people who knew her at the time, right before the crime, right after the crime, and then seeing how these individuals are portraying her as they recall what she was behaving like. I think that we could have some information that would help point us toward the truth. But if a lot of this was reliant on her self-report at the time, this is the trouble we're having, because she was taken at face value. But children can fake symptoms, and I think this is one of those things that we have to be thinking about when we're thinking about the forensic setting.
All right, Dr. Judy Ho, great insight. Thank you so much. So here's the question tonight. What exactly do you do with this now 21-year-old? Our think tank getting ready. They've got the answer tonight. Charles Middlestat, Meg Strickler, Daryl Cohen up next.
We are underway in the trial of doomsday prophet Chad Daybell.
Prosecutors say they will seek the death penalty against him.
Investigators have recovered human remains at Chad Daybell's residence.
There's no way, Morgan. I can never come up with this.
His wife, Lori Vallow Daybell, has already been convicted.
Now, will her husband end up with the same fate?
It's just so hard to know where the truth ends.
It's the doomsday prophet, Chad Daybell, on trial.
We know she wasn't well, and the records are replete for years that she wasn't well. And it's incredible to think that she could have faked that well, something she didn't know how to do. She appeared psychotic before she ever arrived to the doorstep of a mental health institution.
On the revelation that she made that she was faking, is there any indication as to why she would now report faking if it wasn't true?
I don't know the answer to that, Judge.
You know, I keep thinking of that statement by Abraham Lincoln. You can fool all of the people some of the time, some of the people all of the time, but not all of the people all of the time. Is this a situation that we're in?
I don't think so.
Unbelievable development today in the Slender Man stabbing case. I'm calling this the final chapter. It may not be. What a revelation. So the 12-year-old who stabbed her friend 19 times, the friend survived, and then is found not to have the mental capacity to serve a criminal sentence, so is sent for help in a mental health facility, is now saying that once she entered that facility, she faked it. She faked her mental illness and fooled everybody. Now she's looking for conditional release. I don't understand what you do with this. I don't understand what you do with this. Let's bring in the think tank now, because I need some help. Joining us live in studio tonight, criminal defense attorney, entertainment attorney, former assistant DA in Atlanta, Daryl Cohen. Also with us tonight, criminal defense attorney Meg Strickler, and criminal defense investigator extraordinaire Charles Middlestat. Great to see everyone here. This is like, I think if the test is whether or not she's dangerous, a potential danger, I think she is, because you can't trust her, you can't believe her, you have no idea what's going on in this mind.
So what you have to look at is what she did. 19 times stabbed a former friend. Whatever she says, be it true, be it a lie, be it a combination, it doesn't matter. You have to keep her under your thumb. She cannot be released.
I disagree. She might be able to be released, but what we heard today in the hearing snippets that we just heard isn't enough, because you can't fake psychotic symptoms. It's not just what you hear in your head. There's a lot going on, and as you heard in that last snippet where you heard that there's been other pieces of information from prior to being 12 years old. there were a lot of signs pointing to her psychotic or psychiatric issues that she had. And so you don't fix it, but I think that's the whole point of the juvenile justice system, is to rehabilitate. So if she's getting better, fabulous, but I don't think she faked anything.
Well, it's not that she's getting better, it's that she's saying she faked it the whole time.
That part's baloney.
So I find this fascinating. I mean, when you listen to Dr. Collins, you listen to Dr. Ho, I mean, I look at this in the bigger through a bigger lens in terms of just the ability of kids today to be influenced by a mythical, fictional character, right? I mean, we're going to deal with more and more of this. This is a real mental health crisis that we're dealing with, and I think it's really important to try to untangle this in a really thoughtful way, right? And so, what strikes me is, you don't just. I disagree with Daryl. You just don't focus on the act itself. You're dealing with a 12-year-old, and so
21 now.
I understand, but whether she faked it, didn't fake it, whether she was schizophrenic at the time, or whether she's truly psychotic, the ability of a 12-year-old to be that manipulative should, in and of itself, call some attention to the other issues going on. To me, as a layperson, it seems like any 12-year-old that has the ability to be that manipulative, regardless of the diagnosis, there's something else going on at home at the time. There was other things going on that contributed to some sort of mental health issue.
Well, shouldn't this be part of the hearing now? I mean, she's now making allegations that she was being sexually abused at home.
That probably was talked about when she was 12, too. I can't think she's just bringing it up now.
Well, for the judge to make this is an important decision for this judge.
It sure is.
Yeah, but there's more to it than that. If she is a danger, if it is a possibility, not a probability, but a possibility that she could once again do this, she needs to be.
But that's what they're trying to figure out.
That's what they're trying to figure out.
And they can't figure it out because she can't get in her head.
Well,
because every time they try to get in her head, it goes somewhere else.
But why? That's the whole thing, and that's what these professionals are trying to do, is trying to figure out why. Was she truly faking it, or is she saying this now because she thinks it's self-serving and it increases her chances of getting what she wants?
Right, because in her mind, right, if I'm faking it, then I'm okay. I was never sick to begin with.
I think that's what she thinks.
Which means you shouldn't be in a mental health facility to begin with. You should be locked up somewhere.
Well, no, I think she's mentally ill.
To me, this is almost like, perhaps, like bad advice from her lawyer. For her to go, hey, I actually was faking it. Really, well, that's actually not going to work in your favor. This may be not something you want to verbalize.
Right.
Because it may not work.
I don't think this was a legal decision by her. I think she was just saying it.
I think this plays into her mental illness. She has it in her mind. She has a delusion that it was all made up. And that's where she is today.
Is this just a continuation of some underlying
now, the victim's
health
the victim's parents are part of this. There's some family relatives in the courtroom. Others are watching on Zoom. Should they have a say in any of this?
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody needs to be involved.
They have to have a say.
Should the victim have a say in being in fear of maybe this person who's not a child anymore, who's 21 now, may suffer again from whatever she was suffering from and come after me again?
I mean, but for the fact that this victim didn't die, she could have been a victim and be dead. And so there wouldn't be a conditional release at this point, possibly. There would be an incarceration probably or possibly for the rest of her life.
That didn't happen.
But it didn't. But it wasn't because of what she did or didn't do that it didn't happen.
It was the miracle of the survival.
I mean, look, the question you just posed is true for almost any victim of a violent crime, right? They could always, almost any victim should have fear that their perpetrator, upon release, could reoffend, right? So that's not the standard, right? You assume that a victim is going to have those feelings. In this case, it really comes down to the mental health professionals trying to untangle a very, very complicated circumstance, which has been made more complicated.
What if they can't untangle it? If they can't untangle it, what
you have to then prevent? You have to prevent this from happening again. You have to protect the public. You have to protect not necessarily this little girl who was stabbed 19 times, but anyone else around there.
Stop! I'm more mental health pro.
Yeah, we don't just throw in the towel when we can't figure stuff out, man.
Yeah.
We have to
apparently, the only way you can figure out is if you have a patient who is being
Well,
Be
no,
truthful.
but that's what a patient is. They're going to be all over the place.
If they're all over the place, then that's a problem. Then they're not better.
They're not better yet.
But maybe
Let's still work
being
at it.
untruthful is actually indicative of something that's underlying, right?
So now get back to the other question I had. In trying to figure out what the truth is here, do we turn this into a hearing about whether or not she's the victim of sexual abuse?
I'm sure that had some part of the mix to it, and it probably should be discussed. If she hadn't
I
talked
think it
about
should absolutely
yes.
be discussed. If that was the reason why she said she lied for all these years, because she didn't want to go back to that home, now she's 21, she can be on her own, she doesn't have to be subjected to that. Well, let's have a little mini trial to figure out if that's the truth.
But I think it's 100%. A mix. It isn't black and white that she lied to stay away from them because she was being sexually abused. I think it's a bowl of stuff. So it's both.
But they
she has mental illness.
Corroborate that. If that's what her statement is now, they either need to dispel that notion or they need to corroborate it.
And I have a feeling she's already
If they can dispel it, then now we know what we're dealing with.
Is this something that could be investigated? Something that you could figure
Absolutely.
this many years later?
Is this the first time it came out, or is it
2 years ago?
Yeah.
That's the first time, in my view. That's not 7 years ago. If it happened and she said this before, whether she was in therapy, then it's much more real to me. But if it's suddenly an OTO, a one-time only, finally coming out, is this another figment of her imagination? Is this more of her psychotic situation?
No, I think it's just a layer, and I think that maybe she may not have realized the depth of it.
All right, based upon what we know right now, would anyone sitting on this couch want her living next door?
No, not until you untangle this mystery.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page there.
No,
we're all on the same page.
No.
We're not giving up on her.
don't give her up.
No, it's not giving up, but it's like at this point, there's not enough information to set her free. Like the presumption isn't that she walks out. The presumption is she stays here being treated until we are sure
100%
that she can be released in some
through progressions.
little pieces at a time.
Yes.
Okay. They're with us the rest of the hour. Up next. A big hearing today in Moscow, Idaho. We have all the details from court in the Idaho student murders case.
We don't care about surveys. We care about these particular questions asked in this particular survey. The defense is welcome to contract with people from California or wherever, I don't care, to go and ask people, can you be fair? What have you heard about this? All of those questions that Ms. Taylor was just talking about at page 2 of the transcript, those are appropriate questions for a survey. Page 4 are not appropriate questions for a survey. Just because they're put in the form of the question doesn't change the fact that they are an affirmative representation of a fact that if the hearer, the listener, was not aware of it, now they have been tainted by it.
Survey said, sorry about that audio. So here's the problem in the Idaho student's murder case. The defense does not want the trial where they are in Latah County, right? They don't want it there. They want to move away, probably to Boise, like the Doomsday Bells went to Boise. They want to get out of town. So what they're trying to do is, instead of bringing jurors in and then questioning them, with the judge there to find out if you can get a jury, they're trying to get ahead of the game a little bit. So they're reaching out to potential jurors and asking them a bunch of questions. The problem is, if these people who are being questioned didn't know anything about the case beforehand, after the questions, they know everything. Like, let me put up on the screen the questions that we're talking about here. Have you read, seen, or heard that DNA found on the knife sheath was later matched to the accused killer? Well, if you didn't know before, now you know. Have you read, seen, or heard if the cell phone tower data shows that the accused killer made several trips near the victim's home in the month before the killing? Well, if you didn't know before the phone call, now you know. Have you read, seen, or heard if the cell phone tower data shows that the accused killer made several trips near the victim's home in the month before the killing? This is insanity. This is insanity. What's happening in that courtroom. There's a hearing today where they're making these arguments. We have some live pictures for you right now. You know, they're really getting into the weeds in this, but this is significant because it's all about where this trial is going to be held. So I want to play for you some of the key arguments made by the prosecution and by the defense.
We are not saying Ms. Taylor herself violated the non-dissemination rule. We're saying that the people who prepared the survey and disseminated the survey and called citizens of Latah County with those fact-specific loaded questions violated the non-dissemination order, and they are agents of the defense. So I don't want this to become personal between Ms. Taylor and myself. We are not alleging Ms. Taylor has done anything wrong. We are dealing with reality that this survey was conducted on, as we understand it, 400, I'll say, innocent citizens of Latah County who were force-fed information that they may or may not have had about this case before they were called by the surveyor takers. And they are loaded questions. Some of the questions are factually wrong. They simply aren't true. That's what we're here about.
Mr. Kohberger is my client, and his rights are of the utmost importance to me. Him being treated fair, his presumption of innocence, him having an impartial jury, those are important things to me, as is his right to counsel. I am not standing up here saying, let me tell you about this survey, let me finish this survey, to hurt him. I'm saying there is pervasive media coverage in this case. It's prejudicial media coverage. We've conducted a survey in Latah County. That survey is going to show bias and that you shouldn't have a trial in this county. What I'm trying to do is say, do you want me to give you information about another place where maybe the bias isn't so great, where maybe Mr. Kohberger can have a fair trial? I'm his advocate. I want to help him. I believe in his innocence. I'm not going to stand in this courtroom and do anything wrong to him at all. I need you to hear the information so you can make a decision, to have the surveys, to have the information when we come back here for change of venue and make a decision on all of the information. Right now, if we come in and do our change of venue, we're going to say you can't have this jury in Latah County, but I can't tell you a better place that will protect him better.
All right, folks. Change of venue hearing, May 14th. Trial begins March 3rd, 2025. Let's bring back in our think tank, Daryl Cohen, Meg Strickler, Charles Middlestat. This is like they blame the media, right? But what the media doesn't do is like call up prospective jurors and tell them the facts. We just don't do that. No, the defense is doing that here. There's no excuse for the open-ended questions. Do you know anything about the case?
What they're trying to do, and what the media does and social media does get ideas and thought processes that are wrong about any trial. It doesn't matter what the storyline is. The way the media is today, it's not just media, it's social media, I think, is mainly the problem. It isn't court TV, it's not normal TV in that sense, but it is all of the information that's being sent out. And she's doing that survey to show the judge that he can't get a fair trial in that county.
But the people who are being contacted are now tainted.
Not necessarily, because some of those facts aren't true.
Come on, you know what? What she did, in my view, was wrong. Having said that, I think it's a no-brainer. You need to move the venue from that county. But
then they're going to move to another venue and they're going to survey those people and taint them. Listen. What is wrong with doing a survey where you say, have you heard anything about this case? What have you heard? Boom. That's a survey. But I think not, hey, did you hear about his DNA on the knife sheath?
But they were doing those facts to say what biases are already there. That's why they're being specific on those questions.
I think it's quite the, I disagree with you, man. I don't see the absurdity in it. I think what they're trying to point out is the absurdity.
They're trying to move it.
Well, of course they're trying to move it.
That's all they're trying to do.
And what's wrong with that?
Move it.
Miss Taylor is trying to be effective. And in the course of trying to be effective, she wants to move the trial.
But there's a gag order.
Absurdity.
There's a gag order.
So that's why you're found in contempt, but the case needs to be moved.
The absurdity of it is trying to perpetuate this myth
No,
that
but there's a
that
fix.
somehow they can get in this
There's a
small
fix.
community that he can possibly get a fair trial. And by taking things that are already out in the public domain and injecting them into a survey to show that everybody already knows, every prospective
And if they
juror.
didn't, they
They're
do
not
now.
tainting anybody.
And if they didn't know, they know now.
No, they not.
Why,
No,
wait,
not
but why not ask an open-ended question? What's wrong with that?
Everybody knows already. She's just pointing
wrong?
out
What's
that's
wrong?
what the
But
survey
it's a
does.
survey, so it had to ask like.
Hi. Yeah. Do you know anything
So
about?
wait a second. You think these people are just going to remember? They're just going to have a bullet point list of what
And
they
if
remember?
they don't, then guess what?
There's no way to do a
then
survey
you can't
like
X
that.
them off.
There's no way to do a survey
Exactly.
like
You
that.
can't do a
Need to
scientific
move
survey.
the trial, and
It's
they
not
need
science.
to sanction.
Yes, it is.
You got questions, you go,
How
yep,
is
knew
that
that one, knew
different?
that one, knew that one, knew that one.
Exactly.
Everyone's gagged, right? They're gagged for a reason. They're
Yes.
gagged because they don't want to taint anyone in the jury.
They're
room.
already tainted.
Right? So asking an open-ended question, you are not saying anything about the case. But when you are saying, did you hear about the DNA on the knife sheath, you are now talking about the case to someone that may or may not know anything.
She
totally
needs
agree
to
with the
be
premise.
sanctioned, but they need to move the case.
I agree with your premise, Vinny, but
Thank you.
In this context, it's a small
You can stay
community.
for the final segment
and
now.
this has gotten so much publicity that the likelihood that every single potential juror has not already been tainted is nil. And that's
Can
what
you
this
put that
survey is
aside
pointing.
and be fair and impartial? Yes.
No.
You can find 12 people in
They're gonna
Latah County who can
successfully
say
move
that.
it. It's
Who can
going to
say
be.
that,
We
but
got
won't
12
mean
for
that.
OJ. I think he got a fair trial.
Oh, he did. Oh, he got a really fair trial.
He did.
Oh,
I think they said not guilty.
But that doesn't
All
necessarily
right, stay where you are, folks. Fasten the seatbelts.
That was all
Up
about a
next.
glove.
In tonight's Tank Takes, a priest is in hot water after allegedly hosting an orgy with a guest who OD'd on ED medication. And tonight we're wondering, was this a cardinal sin?
There was pounding on the door. Bang, bang, bang.
He said that we'd seen his face and there was no way that he could ever let us go.
I survived because I'm a born fighter.
I Survived. Next on Court TV.
Welcome back. Time for tonight's Tank Takes, where we take a look at the world of crime and justice, and we talk about those stories that we just don't talk about in the rest of the show. So let's get to the first one. I'm calling this one EDOD. I can't believe this story. So apparently a priest was hosting an orgy party, or whatever they call it, right? It's like an orgy party. And it was a little bit out of control, and there was a professional there, a professional man who overdosed on some ED pills that he was taking. And the priest was like trying to keep anyone from coming inside until finally police forced their way in. This is insane. So I'm wondering tonight, was this a cardinal sin? Daryl Cohen, Meg Strickler, Charles Middlestad with us.
This poor priest just wanted everyone to have a religious experience. And he was so much into the days of Rome and the Roman Empire. He wanted
Didn't
to
that
repeat
empire
it.
fall at some point because of all of this?
And so did this gentleman.
I can't remember.
My initial impression was sort of in conflict with the ultimate outcome. So initially I thought, he's frocked. But as it turns out, he was defrocked in the end. And so it was...
So
Yeah.
I love that.
That's really good.
That was well done.
That is really well done. Charles Middlestad stepping up tonight.
Yes, gold star.
He didn't want to be frocking that day. No, sir.
All right, let's get to the next story tonight. I'm calling this one Focasso. So a man, and he's an aspiring artist, works in this great museum, an art museum, and he ended up taking one of his own paintings and putting it on the display because he's an artist. He ends up getting fired because of it, gets into a lot of trouble. But you know me, I'm not much of really an art buff, but I believe our guests are. So I'm gonna show you 3 paintings, and I want you to know which of these 3 was painted by one of our Court TV producers. So let's take a look at them. You've got A, B, and C, two of them by legendary artists, one by a legendary producer here of my program. Daryl, is it A, B, or C? Which one's done by my producer?
My answer is yes.
No idea.
No idea.
I'm just gonna throw out C.
C?
I mean, I think they're all equally talented, but you know what? I think the guy was brilliant. And to me, it's sort of the equivalent of like an extra in a movie who's not supposed to have a speaking part, who decides to have a little speaking part.
Exactly.
You know, and he's just putting himself out there, seeing if he can.
I think it's brilliant.
Look at that.
Thought it was brilliant.
The most brilliant part is how Charles avoided answering because he doesn't know it. Let's reveal the one. A is My Mom's House by Virginia Warner. B is The Artist's Garden at Giverny by Claude Monet. And Almond Blossom is C by Van Gogh. So Virginia Warner with A is the masterpiece.
See, I didn't know, because I didn't know. I thought Van Gogh worked here. I was like, wow.
That's before he lost his ear.
All right. Final story of the night. Charles really stepping up tonight. I'm calling this one ABCDUI. And a woman is pulled over. There's a sobriety skills test. They asked her to do the alphabet because they suspect her of driving under the influence. Let's take a look.
Close your eyes and say your alphabet from A to Z.
Years ago. A, B, C, E, F, G, H, I.
Okay. All right, so Miss Tammy, you're going to be placed under arrest for driving under the influence.
No, it's not. I don't know that. It's like,
that's fine. I'm going to have you stay here for a minute. I'm going to pull my car up because I don't think that you can walk back there. So just stay with this deputy for a second.
Oh, boy. Back to school or back to jail? Where should she go?
That's an injustice. That woman never knew her ABCs. It's clear.
She didn't.
ABC, NBC, CBS. Who knows?
Well, I will see you all later. Thanks for coming by. Daryl Cohen, Meg Strickler, Charles Middlestadt, great to see you. All right, folks, before we go tonight, please take a look at your television screens. We have a missing child who needs your help. This is Egypt Crosby, just 14 years old, missing out of San Francisco, California. If you see Egypt, please pick up the phone, make the call, 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the San Francisco Police Department. That phone number is on your screen. Let's see if we can get Egypt to a safe place tonight. I'm Benny Politan. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.